Hi, everyone, and welcome to Sake Unplugged, your weekly sake podcast in which we take you on a sake journey and show you what's behind the sake curtains. I'm Cindy, a sake professional and Japan expert, and with me is Giulia, a sake educator and sake sommelier. But that's not all. This week, again, we have a very special guest. We welcome Roberto Maxwell, a journalist and sake professional. So pour yourself a cup and enjoy sake from the sake point of view. So yes, we are really excited because this is the first interview of our season 2. And we have I'm going to say semi-international guest because obviously, Roberto, you're very international, but you are based in Japan. So we are super excited to talk to you, and the combination of Brazilian passion and sake and obviously Japanese culture. You are the founder and you're running Tokyo Aijo, a great homepage, but you're also doing a lot of YouTube, and we hope to learn a little bit more about it. But I know you are the best person to talk about it. So let's welcome you to Sake Unplugged. We are so happy that you're here with us today.
I am very happy to be here today. And, I'm very excited, to talk about sake with you too. And yes, let's drink all together here this night, and talk about sake. Thanks for inviting me.
We are always ready to share some sake, especially with you, Roberto. Thank you so much for coming to Sake Unplugged. So before we dive into all the things we want to ask you, first thing, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got to Japan. What brought you to Japan?
Well, I think Cindy gave some spoilers at the beginning. So I am from Brazil. I lived in Japan for 17 years almost. So it's gonna be 17 years in October this year. And
Amazing.
I came to it's unbelievable, to be honest. I never thought ever in my life that I would be living in Japan, in a way. And so I came to Japan as an international student. So I studied at the University of Shizuoka for 3 years and a half, at the beginning as just a regular research student. And then I got into the master course and study social sciences here. And I was a filmmaker in Brazil, but my main job was teaching. So I was in the middle of something that I want to change careers. So I came to Japan and I started to work as a journalist, making publications about the Brazilian community in Japan. For those who doesn't know, in Brazil, there are lots of Japanese descendants. So it's the largest community of Japanese people outside Japan. So we have more than almost 2 million Japanese people and Japanese descendants living in Brazil. And part of these people, they came to Japan as immigrants. And so there's almost 200,000 Brazilians living in Japan now. So it's a huge community. So we have magazines. We had a TV channel. We don't have it anymore. So we had lots of jobs for journalists, for people who work with media. So that was the way that I changed my career from a teacher to a journalist. So that's what brought me to Japan.
And it might be worth mentioning, all your content is in, I'm going to say Brazilian, because I don't think it's Portuguese, right?
It's Portuguese, yeah. Yeah, I was always asked by people to write in English or to make videos in English. The thing is, there's so much content in English about sake and about Japan and about everything. And although we are one of the most, the largest population on the internet, Brazilians use the internet a lot, we have few content in Portuguese in comparison to this action of Brazilians on the internet. So I thought that maybe writing in Portuguese and producing contents in Portuguese would be much more useful. I could touch much more people that wouldn't have access to the content if I was writing in English. So, and it's working. So I love speaking in English. I love the possibility to talk to lots of people but still think that working in my language makes me feel much more like how can I say, much more makes my content like goes to the place that it should be, you know.
Yeah, and I think it certainly translates because I think you're extremely authentic, and I love the fact that you're obviously speaking Portuguese and you're doing your content in Portuguese. I read one of your articles that you have written, and thanks to Google Translate, I could also understand it. And it was still beautiful because I think we are really spoiled these days with technology that we can actually access all these articles in different languages. But to kind of broaden up the horizon of sake and bring it to people who might not be speaking English, I think this is a very genius idea. And I think you're definitely reaching people that otherwise would maybe not hear about it. And we said it before many, many times, the more people that get a chance to get access, the better. So you're definitely doing the right thing, I think.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that you read the article and you could understand it. So I'm really glad that the things are working this way.
Your website is really, really beautiful. And you have a lot of different kind of articles. Of course, for me being Italian, it's a bit easier to read through it. They're not so similar as languages, but it makes it a bit more easier for me. But you have a lot of different kind of topics that you talk about, right? I just want to ask you, how did it started? Like, what was the beginning? What was your first articles? Because I know you also write a lot about sake, but other aspects of Japanese history and lifestyle. So how did it started?
Yeah, Tokyo Aijo was an idea for a magazine, actually, like a paper magazine. So I wanted to produce like a magazine that could be like a really like a show like the things that are happening in Tokyo, and then like expanding a lot like in all over Japan. But unfortunately, like we didn't make money enough like to print it. So we had like the first edition in PDF, and it was like a buzz like among like Brazilians, not only in Japan but also in Brazil. Like people thought that this was like a really good thing, and it like was a new thing. Like we were talking about contemporary Japan, like most of the content that people have access in Brazil are talking about Japan as that traditional country that people imagine that is still in the Edo period, you know. So we were talking about like we have like an article, for example, like about a Nepalese restaurant in Tokyo that's run by a Nepalese chef who's married to a Japanese woman who lived in Brazil for a while. And the chef, he's like in love with Brazilian food. He's fond of Alex Atala, which is one of the most famous Brazilian cooks. So like it was a mix of things that's so Tokyo, so contemporary. And people were like, "Oh, I didn't even imagine that such a thing existed." Because this Tokyo we are used to, because we live here, it didn't go to Brazil like all the way. You know, people are still thinking of Tokyo maybe with Tokugawa Ieyasu somewhere. You know, so this contemporary approach was for the magazine, and then I thought that it would be maybe too much of a waste if I stopped because we didn't make money for the magazine. So we had one second edition in PDF as well. And then we realized that we could like maintain this as a magazine because it's much more difficult like to produce the stories and everything. So we started like to put all the content as HTML on the internet, and people could access like freely. And then that's why like Tokyo Aijo is like the articles are all like available, so people can access like directly, don't need to have a PDF reader, so you can access the articles. But I've been on the internet for a long time, so like I'm 47 years old. I had like the first blog on Blogger, you know, at the beginning, and like I was in many projects in Brazil like related to what we called at the time Internet 2.2.0, you know. So I've been like on the internet for a long time, producing content, not only written, but videos and everything. So it was just a natural thing, like to have a website. Like, talking about the contemporary Japan. And of course, since sake is becoming more and more like talked about, and yeah, since I started to study really deep sake, so sake is one of the main themes we have on the site right now.
Right. So at this point, this is the question we always ask all our guests, because you were mentioning, of course, sake. You write about sake. You're a sake professional. But what was your, if you do remember it, of course, what was your first experience with sake? Tell us. You're already laughing, so it must be interesting.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I wasn't supposed to remember this, because like I don't look shy, but I am really shy. So I work as a journalist, so I have to put out myself. So I have to put my face on videos and everything. So people say, "Lord, he is the shy." He's not shy, no shy, but I'm really shy. So and I was going to a place like for a night like club. So I was like really concerned, like if I was dressing well, or if I was like I would like meet someone. I was feeling alone, and it was in Shinjuku. Like in Shinjuku, there's an area called Shinjuku Nichome. Like it's a gay neighborhood. So I was like crazy to go there, but I was really shy. And I passed in front of a sake store. I didn't know like anything about sake at the time, but I knew that was a drink store, so I could buy something to drink. And I asked the guy, I saw some bottles, and I asked the guy what was that, and he said like, "This is Nihonshu, this Japanese sake." And I said, like, I want one of this, but I never drank this, so what would be the best thing for me? And he said like something that I don't remember what was, but I remember like having this bottle with me, going to Nichome with this bottle in my hand, and drinking like slowly, like to get used, because like people who know me from like my young years, they don't believe that I worked with sake, because I wasn't the guy who drank. Like I didn't drink anything when I was going out. I was the guy who brought the drunk people home. And they was like, "You're drinking now?" So yeah, I'm drinking. So what's the problem? But yeah, nobody believed that. So I was like drinking really carefully because I didn't want to get drunk. I just want to relax a bit. And what I remember was I got into Nichome with that bottle. People started asking what it was. So I started giving sake to everybody. And by the end of the night, I was like full of friends, and I was dancing with everybody. I remember that I made out with someone that I don't remember who, and all thanks to sake. And the next day, my concern was how I'm gonna like wake up. And I woke up like a brand new, as if I hadn't drink anything. And I was like, this is really good, actually. Like I'm feeling good. I had a great night. I shared the sake with other people, so I made friends. And this was the first like time. So I took a little longer like to study sake, probably 3-4 years after this. But I realized that there was something different in sake in comparison to other like drinks. I don't know, like I was. I wasn't the guy who drank, and times I remember that I drank. I was getting drunk and really bad, like wasted in the following day. And this time it did not happen. I know that this is not for everybody. I know that many people drink sake, don't feel good at the next day. But for me, it worked pretty well. So that's why I decided to go deeper and deeper and deeper in sake. And with the pandemics, I think it happened to many people. Like we could not go out. And I got an offer from now a friend, Fabio Ota. He is one of the Brazilians with like more qualifications of sake in the world. Probably he's the guy, the most qualified sake professional of Brazil. And he met me at the airport one day, and he recognized me from Instagram. So like, you're Roberto Maxwell. I want to offer you a sake course. And I was like, yeah, I want it. So I remember, I think I was going to Brazil. He was going back. So when I returned to Japan, it was the beginning of the pandemic. So I got in touch with him, and I told him like, let's start this story of sake. And he gave me like the first course online. And after that, I started studying a lot. Like I got course with John Gongner, like everybody. And then I got into the JSS Academy, so which is like a thing for many professionals in sake around the world. I got to Sado Island, to Gakogura, like to learn how to make sake. So I decided really to go deep and drink. Like during the pandemics, like we had this possibility, like to order sake and drink at home, and to enjoy the sake, not to go and get drunk as I did before, but to enjoy sake, to taste, like to experiment with other food, with temperatures, with everything. And when I realized I was working with it.
I love it. I love this story. I think this is the best story we heard so far, Giulia, isn't it? I can just imagine.
The best so far.
Because I can imagine a young Roberto walking around Nichon with a bottle of sake, giving sake to everybody and starting dancing. I wish I was there. You know, I think you probably converted many, many people that night to become sake lovers.
They're like sake lovers and lovers in sake.
I love that. Because one often leads to another.
Yes.
And we leave it there.
Like I can relate with this because I mean, Lyle, I am married, so I have my partner, and he is younger than me. He's Japanese. He has never like tasted sake before. And when he returns, he was working in Brazil, although he's Japanese, he was working in Brazil. When he returned to Japan, was at the beginning of the pandemics. And we started to have like these sake nights, like every weekend. So I was buying some special cheese, some make pairings, and he learned about sake. We learned together, actually. We were like experimenting sake together. So I used to say like we are sake lovers, but lovers in sake as well, because like we were having this taste like almost every weekend together. And that's, I think, is the best way like to learn about sake, you know, like you have someone you like a lot. It doesn't need to be your husband or your wife or your boyfriend, but it can be like a friend you like a lot, and you both together, or three of you or whatever, like together, sit around the table and drink sake all together. So this is the best way to learn about sake, you know. It's the best environment to taste and to have like a real relation with sake.
I couldn't agree more because, and I think we've been saying this before, Giulia as well, I know I can speak for her here. I think for us, it's such a social thing. It's such a community thing. It's really, you want to be with people and you want to drink with them. It's really about exchanging. It's not just about the beverage and getting drunk, although, of course, this happens occasionally a little bit as well. And we get happier and merrier as we drink. But I think I'm very much with you on the fact that it's all about being with people, you know, coming together over a meal, over a drink. And that's really what it's all about. So no, really, really beautiful. I'm really thankful that you're sharing this with us, and obviously everybody who's listening. You also gave us a really good lean into a next question, because we were going to ask you a little bit about sake and food, and obviously maybe Brazilian food and how sake is being consumed in Brazil and how it's kind of interacting with the Brazilian culture. So do you have any favorite?
Yeah, like there's a good, the story about like sake in Brazil is interesting because, as I said before, like in Brazil, like you have lots of Japanese people or people with Japanese origin. So sake, like it seems that one of the first sake factories outside Japan was open in Brazil. So we have like more than 100 years of producing sake in Brazil. But it was limited for most of the time to the Japanese community. So like the non-Japanese Brazilians, they wouldn't have access to sake, I don't know, like until maybe 40 or 50 years ago. But like it's not really accurate, so I can be wrong. But what happens is in the last 10 years, like sake became a thing in Brazil. First, as part of a drink called sakeirinha. So we have a drink in Brazil called caipirinha, which is made with cachaça. Cachaça is a distilled drink, so it's a spirit made by sugarcane. So we use cachaça, sugar, lime juice, and it's a really sweet but really strong in alcohol drink, because like cachaça is almost 40%, I think 41% like alcohol content. And then for people who were like not really strong, like to drink caipirinha with cachaça, people start to make caipirinha with sake. So people start like to drink sake through this sakeirinha thing. So the restaurants start to take more like attention, to pay more attention to the sake like a menu, you know. So they start like to order like better sake, like for the menu, starting with the Japanese food restaurants. And now what we see in Brazil is something like more and more restaurants without like this label of Japanese cuisine or Asian cuisine wanting to serve sake, like it's a trend everywhere, not only in Brazil. So during the pandemic, like I don't have the figures here, but during the pandemic, one of the few countries in the world that the sake imports were growing was Brazil. So like we are seeing that we have a market that can be bigger and like has lots of potential, and people want to know about sake, especially people who are interested in wine. We have like lots of possibilities like to inform people. So I'm always invited for interviews for in TV channels or in magazines, like to talk about sake because people want to know about it. So it's a really good moment for sake in Brazil right now. So we have Fabio, my sake teacher. He is organizing a sake festival like for this year was the second year. It was a huge like sake festival in São Paulo this year with people. Last year was only online. And I was there because I was also organizing an event at the same time about shochu and awamori. So it was like a different thing, but we were working together like to make people understand like these are the three kokushu, the three Japanese traditional like a beverages. So we were working together like to promote the three of them together. And we see that people are really interested in sake. And during like this event, I had the opportunity to work with some of the most important Brazilian chefs and try to like to pair with Japanese food. So, for example, like we have one sake like that's becoming really popular in Brazil now is the kanatsurai from Nida Honke. Like Anida Honke is a sakagura that produces sake naturally, so 100% like organic rice. So this is a huge appeal for people in Brazil right now. But it's not only this, like the taste of the sake is amazing. And it was something that at the beginning we didn't know if it was going to work, because kanatsurai was produced to be drunk warm. And in Brazil, we don't have like this culture of drinking like alcohol warm. It's a hot country, so people want to drink it cold, and the coldest the better. So we drink like a beer, like a really cold, which is super strange for people in Europe. But anyway, it's a hot country.
Well, not yet, you know.
Yeah, not anymore.
Maybe it's going to happen, you know, I think, because it's really hot in Japan as well. Like we still drink kanzake in the summertime. So maybe that's something that can be introduced in the future as well.
Yeah, so like it's happening that people are not drinking in Brazil like as hot sake. Like people are drinking many different ways. But like what happened was this sake is so versatile that was working a lot like with many of the Brazilian foods we have. We eat lots of meat. So we have like a type of barbecue called churrasco. It's different than American barbecue. It's more savory than sweet. So this sake worked really well with meat. And even with salads, actually, like we eat a lot of salads in Brazil as well. We are like searching for these combinations. We see like a lot of potential. Like sake is also really diverse, right? So we can like find like many different pairings. But yeah, like we had this experience with kanatsurai, and it worked really well. Like there's a lot of possibilities to work with Brazilian food and sake. We have lots of influence of Italian food. As you know, like Italian food goes really well with sake as well. So
yes,
yeah, like we are doing like lots of good pairings there.
I'm already hungry just listening to you telling us all these stories. But I also wanted to ask you something about Brazilian sake, because you were saying, of course, Brazil was one of the first, if not the first country having sake breweries, right? So do you think the sake that is brewed in Brazil, it tries to be, let's say, closer to the Japanese sake, or you think they're trying to develop their own style?
I think that at the beginning was like this idea of like we have to produce sake the same way they produce in Japan, but it's impossible. Like we don't have like the climate, we don't have like the rain, we don't have the soil, so it's completely different. So I think now people are more aware of this impossibility, and they are trying to develop a sake with a Brazilian taste. But what I think is we need to drink more Japanese sake first, like to understand it better, and then to make it better. Like, I mean, to taste it, to understand it better, and then we can start like thinking of developing a real Brazilian style sake. It's really difficult. Like I was talking with some producers, like they are doing their best, but I think like the future is gonna be like we will work with sake as a Brazilian thing, and we are going to have this Japanese base, but we are trying to produce like a Brazilian taste sake, and I think it's going to work this way.
And I'm kind of curious on this. Is there something that you think works really well in Brazil? To give you an example, when we talked to Ruben from Singapore, he said that Singaporeans really enjoy fruity sake. They have a very sweet tooth. So everything that kind of appeals into that, they want to drink. So I'm kind of curious, is there a style or something that you feel works really well for the Brazilian market?
I think that people like I will not say like that I mean like we are like Singaporean people, probably like we have like this, as I love the word, like this sweet teeth. So people like sweet things, but I don't think that is the only type of sake that could be like more popular in Brazil. Like I know like lots of people, especially people who likes like to enjoy like different like beverages and drinks and everything. People who like cocktails, for example, that like it more dry, for example. So I think our market, like if we focus on one type of sake, we're gonna make it wrong, because I think that the tastes are really diverse. Of course, like sakes that have more personality, and this could be for the drier side or for the sweeter side. They have more possibilities, like the case of Kanatsurai. Like Kanatsurai is a sake that is really deep in flavor. So we hear people saying that they feel caramel, they feel like for more the sweet side of the sake, and we hear people saying that more umami. So like it's a really complex sake. So I think sakes with more personality, they have more possibility like to get big, like in Brazil. Like the thing is, people want to drink something that makes like a difference, you know, like that they drink and say, oh my God, this is impressive, I want to drink it more. So more than like choosing a type of sake, like for more the sweet side or for more the dry side, I think like sakes with personality, with presence, with complexity will be more like popular in Brazil in the future for sure.
And it's interesting because I think that was very similar to what he said. But I think a big point that he was making was that there is a predominant preference for what they enjoy drinking. And it's really down to the importer and the educators and the restaurant owners and chefs to introduce other sake and kind of broaden that horizon so people can experience kind of all that sake can be. And also kind of educating the taste, right? Because sometimes we are in a certain palate, depending where we come from. But that's a lot about importing sake and kind of sake styles. But kind of circling back a little bit to what you're doing, Roberto, I know you also did a documentary on sake, and I'd love to hear a little bit about it. So do you mind sharing some of the key points and that our listeners know?
Yeah, like one thing that I was missing when I was studying sake was to get in touch with the producers. So I wanted to learn from them. I want to know them. I want to be close to them. I want to be inside the breweries. And the way I came up with this was to produce a series about sake. So the idea of the series is basically like each episode like portrays one sakagura, And in the end of the episode, like we choose one of the sake that is like more emblematic of this sakagura, or like we try like to show, since like my public is Brazilian, so we try like the best we can to show sake that people can purchase in Brazil as well, but we cannot, like, I mean, I go for my personal interests as well, so I go to places where I like the sake too. So like basically I talk with one of the persons, could be like the owner of the brewery, could be the toji, and this person like explains, so tells the story of the sakagura and talk about the way they produce sake, so the specialties, and in the end they introduce one sake. So we have like 2 seasons so far. Like it's called 3 times sake, so it's 3 episodes by for each season. So I do it everything, like I do everything like with my own like money and possessions and everything. So I would love to make like a 10 times sake per season, but it's impossible. And I work mostly alone, so I wouldn't say this is a one-man gig, but mostly like people see the credits and they laugh because I am there like almost doing everything. So we had like the first season last year, portraying like Anida Honke, Kojima So Honten, like they introduced the sake, they have this Toko Cho Karakchi, and Urakasumi. So in the second season, we just released it last week, like so the second week of August. So we have a Kurumazaka. So we interview like Fujita Akiko-san, like one of the few female tojis in Japan in this season. We have like a Kubo Honke, which is a sakagura that produces koshu. They produce other things too, but like their koshu is really interesting because they work with complete fermentation. So the sake is almost 0% sugar, so it's really dry and it's really interesting. And then we talk about the youngest generation of sake breweries. We interviewed the youngest toji of Mie Prefecture. He's the toji of Otashuzo that produce one sake that's really interesting. It's called Hanzo Ando. And it's like his goal is like to introduce sake to young people. So my idea is to show like the contemporary scene of sake in Japan by portraying stories of sakagura. The series is in Japanese, subtitled in Portuguese. I would love to subtitle it in English because I think their stories are like for many people to know. I don't have like anybody to translate it to English, but like if someone could help, like I'll be really happy. But yeah, like it's something that I make like to show not only that sakaguras and their stories, but my passion for sake and to learn from them like directly in the source. So it was a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it sounds really awesome. And I think, it's not always about hitting the big numbers and having the large audiences. I think there is beauty in the smaller things. And I think every little effort leads to something else. And, you never know where it takes you. And also doing it kind of on this low budget by yourself, I think it gives you access to a different, how can I say it? It gives you access to the real people. I think sometimes when there's the big budget coming in, there's a lot of shyness, there's a lot of awkwardness, but you coming in as a person and meeting them face to face, one by one, I think it gives a lot better results and really portraying the real Japan and what the lives really is like, right?
Exactly, like people are really intimidated by cameras, right? So I work with a mirrorless camera, which is a small camera, and I don't have like much like resources like to capture audio, for example. So in this season, I had an assistant, but he was a person that he knew like everybody in the 3 sakaguras, so he wasn't totally strange. And I think that we got access to things that usually a normal crew will not get
totally
access. For example, in the first episode, like about Kurumazaka, at the end of the first day, Fujita Sensei invited us to a barbecue with the Kurabito because it was the first batch of the year, like the end of the first batch of the year. So like to be with them, I mean, like I shot some things, but I wanted to enjoy a lot. So I finished the documentary with this footage, but like to see her like with the Kurabito like having free time is interesting and something that other crews will not have access at all. So it was really good, like to go this way. And even if we can make something bigger of this in the future, I would still like to have like a small crew again. And this is the best way like to get closer to the people.
And I'm looking forward to that. I hope you can go bigger, but stay true to your roots and keep getting those really close relationship. And it's all about trust, right? And building that trust and then being able to get these insights and share with the world. It's really special. But I think we're unfortunately really, really close to our wrap-up time. But I know Giulia has like one very burning question. I know, right? We have to get you back. So Giulia, hit us. You have one more question that you really want to ask, right?
Oh yeah, because of course Roberto is telling us all of this, his documentaries and all this sake, and also you were talking about Nida Honke before that pairs really well with Brazilian food and everything. But it's probably a difficult question, the most difficult question. But do you have your own favorite sake?
I do, and I will be I will repeat myself, but Nida Honke was the first sakagura that I fell in love with. And it wasn't only because of the story of the sakagura and everything about the natural produced sake, but because their sake is amazing. And they have a seasonal sake called like a 3.33. It's a sake that they release like at the beginning of the summer, as far as I remember. And usually sake is produced, the shubo is produced in 3 steps in 4 days. So this sake is producing 3.33 steps, 3 1/3 steps. So that's why they put this name. And the result is a sake really aromatic, melon, and really sweet in the aroma, but also in the palate. And I like it a lot. First, because the taste, but second, because of this idea of seasonality. So I cannot have this sake the whole year. I try, so I buy a lot and I keep in the refrigerator to open it when I get really special guests at home. But it's my favorite.
How do you keep it in the refrigerator? I know your fridge has no space for nothing.
Yeah, so I have one left there. So yeah, this sake I love, and this represents pretty much what I understand about Nida Honke. So this passion to produce sake in a natural way and to make it special in a way that other people wouldn't imagine. So I love the sake, and this sake, I always wait for this sake every single year. So to buy at least 10 bottles and keep in my fridge, to try to
your personal stash of sake you have.
I love it. So we have to come to your house when you stashed your fridge with it and then give it a try, because there's probably none left after you've been through the shops. There's no more for the rest of us here.
Yeah, exactly. I buy everything.
Go to Roberto's house if you want to try this sake. That's probably the shout out that we have to be giving here. But yeah, exactly. No, I love it. Your stories are really amazing. I mean, from obviously how you got to sake to what you're doing with sake now, and your connection with sake both in Japan and Brazil. It's really inspiring, and I think a lot of people will be visiting your homepage and be watching your videos. So maybe do you want to tell us exactly where they can find you so they can go and check out what you're doing?
I think the easiest way is to find me on Instagram. So my Instagram is at Roberto Maxwell. It's basically Roberto in Italian, in Portuguese it's the same, and Maxwell in German, so it's the same. So it's just combining these 2 names. So on Instagram, I write mostly in Portuguese, but I'm pretty open to talk privately with people who doesn't understand Portuguese. And so if you wanna get closer, so just hit me on Instagram so we can talk there. So we'll be really happy to know that you listen to the podcast and you like to get closer and be friends.
No, and I must say again, even if you don't speak Portuguese, it's well worth watching, and you do have beautiful content, you have beautiful photos, and everything that's written, it's easily translatable. So it's still almost as good as the original, because I know there's always a little bit of loss on the sentiment and the details there. But we will put the information also into our info, so you can just click on it and then sign up and follow and subscribe to everything that Roberto does. And then we're waiting for the next video from your documentary to come out. When is it coming out? You want to tell us?
Like this season is over already, so the 3 episodes are on Instagram, so you can watch the 3 of them. So next year, I hope so.
That burns. But we will obviously also watch them as soon as they come out. But yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you for being here with us today. It was really lovely.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me in the podcast. I'm really happy to be here, and I hope like many people enjoy this.
We will be back again next week with another episode. We will be talking about seasonal sake. So what you said there earlier, Roberto, feeds well into our timeline of podcasts. We will be talking about Hiyaoroshi, which is something that me and Giulia quite like because it is doing quite well heated up. One of our favorite pastime activities, heat up all the sake that we can. So next week we'll be back with Hiyaoroshi as a topic. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast yet, then please do so. Follow us on Instagram so you never miss anything we do. And with that,
have a nice sake.